I had spent years building my fashion empire from the ground up. It wasn't easy, countless hours, sleepless nights, and sacrifices that no one else saw. So, when I was called in for a meeting with the board of directors at one of the most prominent companies in the industry, I thought it was my moment to finally be recognized. I walked into the sleek, modern boardroom, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The room was filled with well-dressed executives, most of them men, who had made their fortunes off of people like me, the ones who broke down barriers to make it. I wasn't intimidated. But I could feel the judgment in their eyes the moment I stepped in. They made comments about my appearance, how unpolished I looked compared to the typical corporate standard. One of them, Mr. Porter, smirked and said, "I thought fashion was supposed to be about refinement, not this." He made a subtle gesture toward my outfit, as though he were dismissing it entirely. But I wasn't just anyone. I didn't let their words slide. I knew exactly how to play this game. As I stood there, I took a deep breath and looked them all in the eye. I wasn't going to let this meeting turn into a mockery. I was here to prove a point, and I had worked too hard to let them underestimate me. "You know, it's fascinating," I began, my voice calm but sharp, "how people love to talk about image and refinement, but when someone who doesn't fit the mold succeeds, suddenly, it's a problem." I paused, letting the words sink in. Their expressions shifted slightly, some of them uncomfortable with the boldness of my words. "I built an empire," I continued, "not by conforming to others' expectations, but by doing things my way. And now, you're questioning my appearance in a room where I should be receiving respect for what I've accomplished, not criticism for what I wear. It says more about you than it does about me." There was a brief silence. I could see Mr. Porter's face flush as he shifted in his seat. I knew that this was the moment, this was where I could either let their views dictate how I felt, or I could show them that I was the one in control. I didn't come here to be judged for my appearance. I came here because I know the value I bring. You will see it soon enough. They were starting to realize they had underestimated me. Over the following weeks, I decided to take action. I wasn't going to sit back and let their ignorance define me. Instead, I set my sights on something bigger. If they thought I was just a fashionista with no business acumen, I'd show them how wrong they were. I began acquiring shares in the company. Slowly, steadily, until I held enough to demand a seat at the table, literally and figuratively. The executives had no idea what was coming. By the time I was ready to make my move, I owned enough stock to force a conversation with the board. At the next quarterly meeting, I walked in, no longer as an outsider trying to prove herself, but as the largest shareholder in the company. The room went quiet when they saw me enter, and I could feel their nervous glances. Mr. Porter looked like he might choke on his words as I sat down at the head of the table. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I smiled. "This is your new reality. I'm here to discuss the future of this company, and it starts with a change in leadership. Effective immediately, I will be taking over the helm." The shock on their faces was palpable. The tables had officially turned. The room buzzed with whispers, but I wasn't about to let them regain control of the situation. I calmly flipped through the documents in front of me, making sure I had their attention. This wasn't just about taking over a company, it was about showing them the power of persistence and self-belief. "I've worked tirelessly to build my empire," I said, my voice steady and firm. "But unlike you, I don't just want control. I want to ensure this company reaches its true potential. I'm going to lead it in a direction that reflects innovation, diversity, and strength. You all will either adapt or be left behind." Their faces turned from shock to panic as they realized that the power dynamics were shifting faster than they could process. Mr. Porter's previously smug expression had been replaced with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't do this," he spat, but his words didn't carry the weight he had hoped. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "I already have." It wasn't just about money or power, it was about proving that they couldn't define who I was. They thought my appearance meant I didn't belong in the corporate world. But now, the company they had spent years building was in my hands. As I assumed control, the shift was immediate. The very foundation of the company began to tremble under the weight of my vision. The executives, once so confident in their power, had no choice but to fall in line. Some tried to resist, clinging to their old ways, but my influence was undeniable. I was no longer just a person they could dismiss, I was the leader they had no choice but to respect. I wasted no time in implementing changes that reflected my values. First, I began reshaping the company's culture. I brought in fresh faces, individuals who understood the importance of authenticity, creativity, and inclusion. We no longer focused on what people should look like or how they were supposed to act. We embraced diversity, not just in terms of appearance, but in ideas, backgrounds, and experiences. I rolled out a new line of fashion that catered to a broader audience, one that was bold, confident, and unapologetic, much like me. The designs were revolutionary, challenging the status quo and proving that fashion could be both beautiful and empowering. But the real change came in the way I handled the board members. Mr. Porter and the others who had once laughed at me were now at my mercy. Their stock was worthless, and their opinions carried no weight. I called them into meetings, one by one, offering them a choice: either they embraced the new vision or they'd be out of a job. Most chose the latter, unwilling to relinquish the outdated practices that had kept them in power for so long. And just like that, I had transformed not only the company, but the entire industry. The news of the company's transformation spread like wildfire. The media couldn't get enough of the story: a woman, who had been dismissed and mocked by the very people she now controlled, turning the tables and rewriting the rules of the game. It wasn't just a business success, it was a cultural statement. It was proof that vision, determination, and staying true to oneself could shatter even the most rigid, oppressive systems. Sales skyrocketed. The new collections we launched became the talk of the fashion world. Critics, once skeptical of my unconventional approach, now praised the boldness and authenticity of my designs. But what gave me the greatest satisfaction wasn't the accolades or the financial success, it was the knowledge that I had turned the very concept of image on its head. Meanwhile, the former board members who had once mocked me were forced to watch from the sidelines. They had tried to make me feel small, to reduce my worth to the way I looked. Now, I was sitting in the seat they never thought I'd deserve, running a company they could only dream of. I held my ground. I didn't take pleasure in their downfall, but I also wasn't going to apologize for my success. If anything, it reinforced my belief that true power lies not in fitting in, but in breaking the mold. And so, the fashion empire that I had built with blood, sweat, and tears was now more than just an empire, it was a symbol. A symbol of resilience. A symbol of overcoming. A symbol of triumph over those who thought they could control and define me. I had the last laugh. As the months went by, the company's success became undeniable. Every collection, every new initiative, was met with overwhelming praise. I had created an empire not just of fashion, but of empowerment. What had started as a personal battle against a few dismissive individuals had now evolved into a larger cultural movement, one that challenged the narrow confines of the corporate world and, more importantly, the fashion industry. The former board members, who once dismissed me, now watched from afar, their influence eroded. Mr. Porter tried to make a comeback, reaching out with half-hearted offers to join forces and move forward together. But I wasn't interested. I had moved beyond them. My success wasn't just about acquiring their company, it was about redefining what it meant to be in charge. Then came the final blow. The media, ever eager for a sensational story, had caught wind of the power struggle behind the scenes. They were fascinated with my rise, from being an outsider mocked for her appearance to now controlling one of the biggest fashion companies in the world. But I wasn't done. I decided to take it a step further. I pulled out the ultimate move, offering a massive partnership deal to a rival company. This deal would not only solidify my dominance in the market but also render the remnants of the old guard powerless. It was a stroke of genius. Once the partnership was announced, the old board had no choice but to face reality. They had been completely outplayed. The world was watching, and my victory was complete. I had not only acquired their company, I had taken their pride, their arrogance, and turned it into my greatest triumph. The partnership deal with the rival company was a game-changer. Not only did it place my empire at the forefront of global fashion, but it also cemented my position as a visionary leader who had rewritten the rules. I had done what they said I couldn't. I had turned every mocking word, every dismissive glance, into a stepping stone that propelled me to the top. The fashion world, once dominated by a select few, now had new icons, new players, people like me, who understood that true power didn't come from looking the part but from owning the narrative. Every campaign we launched, every product line we introduced, reflected that. We showcased real people, people of all sizes, backgrounds, and walks of life. My brand became synonymous with authenticity and inclusivity. And yet, I didn't stop there. I took it beyond the world of fashion. I launched a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, particularly women of color, who had always been told they didn't fit the mold. I wanted to show them that success wasn't about conforming, it was about carving your own path. I opened doors for them that I had fought so hard to open for myself. I frequently spoke at conferences, not as a token success story, but as someone who had fought, and won. I spoke about resilience, about how the real battle wasn't the one against the naysayers, but the one against the limits we often place on ourselves. I told them to never let anyone tell them they weren't enough, because enough was a term invented by people who couldn't see the potential in others. The board that had once mocked me, they were now nothing more than a footnote in my story. They could try to return, try to reclaim the company, but it was clear they could never truly take back what they had lost. The empire I had built wasn't just a fashion empire anymore. It was a movement, one that would continue to inspire and redefine the world for years to come. Years passed, and what had started as a quiet personal vendetta had evolved into something far more powerful than I had ever imagined. My fashion empire continued to thrive, but what I took the most pride in was the ripple effect I had created. People often asked me, "How did you do it?" My answer was simple: I didn't let others define my worth. The mocking comments, the dismissive attitudes, the moments when I was made to feel smaller, they didn't break me. They fueled me. Every time I was doubted, every time I was underestimated, I saw it as an opportunity to show the world that power doesn't come from fitting in, it comes from standing tall, even when the world tells you to shrink. The industry had changed. More companies began to follow my lead, embracing diversity, inclusion, and authenticity. They saw the success I had achieved and realized that it wasn't just about fitting a certain image, it was about making space for those who didn't fit the mold. I had also created a lasting legacy in the form of the mentorship program. Hundreds of young women and men, from all backgrounds, were now building their own empires. They had learned from my journey, not just how to succeed in business, but how to never let anyone's limited vision of them hold them back. They understood now that power was about owning who you were, unapologetically. And through it all, I remained grounded. I never let the success get to my head. I always remembered that the true test wasn't how high you could climb, but how many people you could bring with you. As I looked back on everything I had accomplished, I knew I had done it for more than just myself. I had done it for the ones who were told they didn't belong. Now, as I stood at the pinnacle of my success, I realized the full weight of what I had built, not just a fashion empire, but a movement. A legacy that would continue long after I was gone. I had turned the tables on those who mocked me. But more importantly, I had created a world where others would never have to face that same judgment. I had done it. And it felt damn good. Looking out from my office window at the city below, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led me here. From the early days of building my brand from scratch, when I was just another dreamer with little more than passion and vision, to the moment I walked into that boardroom and turned the tables, I had come a long way. But it wasn't just the victories, the acquisitions, or the media attention that made this journey worth it. It was the lives I had touched along the way. The women and men who had once felt like they didn't belong, who had once been told they couldn't make it, now stood beside me. We had built a community, a culture, and a company that valued individuals for their strengths, not their appearances. The old board members. They had faded into obscurity. Their arrogance had made them blind to the opportunities that I had seized. They couldn't see the future, they couldn't understand that true leadership came from authenticity and resilience. They had lost their grip on the company, and, in many ways, on reality. Now, I had more than just a successful fashion empire. I had something far more precious, a legacy that would outlast any company, any contract, any deal. It was a legacy built on breaking boundaries, on redefining what success looked like, and on showing the world that no one, no matter their appearance, should ever be underestimated. The tables had been turned, but the real victory was knowing that I had created a future where no one would ever have to prove their worth based on what others saw on the outside. The world had learned that true strength was found in the courage to be yourself. And as I walked out of the office that day, I knew the battle had been won, not just for me, but for everyone who would follow. This was just the beginning.